Good morning, everyone. I want to call this meeting of the Joint Enforcement Task Force on Workplace Fraud to order. It's Friday, May 31st at 11:03 a.m. So first, let's get started. We have a few administrative things, and then I'm going to have my comments, but staff is going to call the roll, and especially I also want to remind everyone that we are on live streaming. The microphones on this table are very sensitive, so for the benefit of everyone who's listening online, I'd ask that you keep side conversations to a minimum. Also, you should understand that side conversations are easily picked up. So with that, let's start by calling the roll.
Calling the roll. Okay.
Becky Burke.
Present.
John Dove.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Maureen Quinn.
Present.
Ms. Joy Hatchett.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Maria Robolino.
Here.
Mr. Jonathan Glazer.
Here.
Mr. Howie will be here in a minute, so we'll just skip him and efforts to say that he will be here. Madam Chair is here.
Yes, here.
And Ms. Torres from UI is here.
She is not, I am here.
Okay.
Directs us. She may be joining, she might be running.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Did I miss anyone?
Ms. Roig. For workers' comp.
Yes. Well, Ms. Quinn is here, so the member is here. So the designee isn't called, sorry. Okay. Any members or designees that I missed that are in place for their member?
Traylene, and she's not in place for. She's.
Oh, here she is, Rachel. Actually, that's a good point. It just might be helpful. Actually, we have a new member joining us this morning. Many of you may know that the Assistant Secretary for the Unemployment Division is a member of this task force, and Ms. Rachel Torres has just started on Wednesday as our new Assistant Secretary.
Good morning.
So welcome, Rachel. Excited to have you. As part of this, Rachel worked at Federal Labor for over 30 years, and actually she worked in the Wage and Hour Division there as well. So she has some experience sort of in different seats at this table. We're excited to have you join us. And Meg, thank you for the work you've done thus far. We look forward to continuing to engage with you on the important issues of the task force. Just a couple more administrative things that we want to clear off at the top. Everyone should have been sent a digital copy of March's meeting minutes. There's a copy in your binder if you didn't have a chance to look at it before. Just wanted to ask if I could have a motion to approve March's meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve March's meeting minutes.
Second.
Who was the second? Ms. Quinn. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, terrific. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you coming here to see us at the Department of Labor. And thank you for traveling. I know we're still waiting for Deputy Attorney General Howie to join us. I have just a few things I wanted to touch on, talk a little bit about what we've achieved so far. We had a great launch meeting, and it was wonderful to have some outside experts share their information with us. Department of Labor in particular has been sort of consumed by the Port of Baltimore Francis Scott Key Bridge response over the last 2 months. So apologies for any delay in circling back with this group, but we're back again. And since we do have a report that's due at the end of this year, I think we're going to be trying to move very expeditiously over the next couple of months and with a lot of focus. I do want to also acknowledge, I think the staff has done a lot of work, sort of, trying to understand the landscape of what's out there. I want to touch on a couple of areas of activity, And then, of course, today we'll be hearing updates from individual agencies and getting sort of a preview of where we're going the next couple of months. One of the key areas that folks have been focused on has been information sharing. So there are several existing information sharing agreements in place. For example, there's one between the Division of Unemployment Insurance and the Comptroller, also between Division of Unemployment Insurance and Workers' Comp. Staff are exploring sort of how can we expand this? How can we modernize that information? I think it's, there's both the question of how can we make sure the right agreements are in place. If ones don't exist, they should. How can we sort of facilitate the smooth flow of that information? And then also, sort of how can we make use of it, right? It's great to have it, but that's a sort of a necessary but not sufficient condition for making sure that we can leverage that information in a useful way to help guide action. So I think that first identification step and potential for expansion is where people have been looking at now, and obviously understand there's a number of legal considerations, federal and state confidentiality laws that need to be addressed. So I look forward to getting an update on that at a future meeting. My understanding is also there's been an informal group of enforcement staff, labor and industry has been leading these discussions that have met a few times to get a better understanding of what compliance and investigative tools are currently available. Is there anything that can be used that we're not using to identify and combat workplace fraud? Again, it feels like there's some productive items here, and look forward to hearing more about that in the agency discussion later today. Through the summer and fall, as I mentioned, and the executive order explicitly talks about this, the need for outreach to stakeholders and impacted communities. So we will be hosting in June, I guess it is in June. Oh, here we are, right there. A stakeholder meeting, bringing together members from the General Assembly, industry stakeholders, from business and labor. I think this is going to be an important time and platform for members of the task force to hear directly from participants, whoever comes, about the realities on the ground. And so gathering insights from that meeting will be important. And of course, we encourage you all to disseminate information out about it. We will be sharing that with you, but I think that, those meetings are really only useful if you get robust participation. So that's what's coming up in June. And then going into the fall, I think we're going to focus on outreach to local government with a thought that we can share information and explore coordinated compliance and enforcement between the state and county level. And of course, continued our discussions around best practices and integrated enforcement among sister agencies. A couple other items, I think as we go into the year of the end, as we've done that landscape analysis, part of what may surface is we don't have some of the authorities we need, or there may be impediments to doing some of the information sharing that would be more useful. And so I think, before the end of the year, we'll want to sort of synthesize all of that information and what we've heard outside and inside, and figure out, are there additional other steps, or there policy recommendations that we should be taking, and that will feed into the report, which we'll need to do at the end of the year. So that is my update. Any questions about any of that?
Do we have an exact June date yet? Or June 20th, we'll have further announcements at the end of the
June 20th is the date.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. I think now we are going to a little bit more of an update about the enforcement staff meetings. I have Commissioner Burke that you're going to say a little bit more about that. And then we're going to go into some agency updates. So looking forward to hearing from member agencies, sort of what's on their mind. And in our first meeting, we sort of delved into the big picture problem. We didn't have quite as much time to get a sense of what each agency's sort of profile is, their expertise, things that are top of mind for them. So we'll spend some time on that. And then we will have a demonstration of the portal. So let me turn it over to Commissioner.
Thank you, Secretary. I'll be brief. We've had 2 meetings of a group of people from all of the agencies that have enforcement powers in this area. And those enforcement powers are very diverse because each agency has a separate mission. So workers' compensation, insurance administration, comptroller, occupational professional licensing, unemployment insurance, and labor and industry all have kind of different pieces and different statutory authorities and different enforcement methodologies and powers that encounter workplace fraud in their kind of daily administration. I think labor and industry is the only one that actually has a specific statutory authority to specifically address workplace fraud in those two industries, construction and landscaping under the Workplace Fraud Act. But each one of the agencies kind of has us encounters and bumps into misclassification issues in just administering their regular programs. So a group of people from each one of those enforcement agencies, together with counsel, has gotten together to do two things, I think mainly. First, to just begin to establish relationships. You know, one of the purposes of the task force is to try to figure out how we can work collaboratively, where we've got a piece over here at the comptroller, we've got a piece over here at L&I, we've got a piece over here at MIA and workers' comp and UI, and sort of how do those pieces fit together in any given set of circumstances, and how might we both understand one another's powers and authorities and processes so that we can use them most effectively to combat the issue. So I think on both those fronts, both establishing relationships and beginning to have some level of understanding of all of these different agencies, authorities, and scopes and processes, at least from my perspective, I feel like we've had some really good and helpful conversations. You know, we've been trying to use some of the cases that labor and industry gets under the Workplace Fraud Act itself, because that's so squarely in the target of what the task force is aimed at. Trillian Putman, my colleague at Labor and Industry, and her workplace fraud unit chief, Alan Griffith, have sort of shared what our processes are, and then we've essentially done a round robin around the room to try to understand how would each one of those agencies tackle this issue, how, you know, what kinds of information might that agency bring to bear, what sorts of methods and processes might each individual agency use to try to address the workplace fraud and misclassification issues that were present in these cases, because sometimes using those concrete examples is helpful. The group actually initially got together as a conjunction of the information sharing discussions, because for several of our partners here, the confidentiality issues and the ability to share information hinges on the purpose for which that information is being used. And so trying to understand how it might be used and what sorts of information might be helpful to the process was kind of the genesis of the group. So, you know, that's kind of the top line highlight, Secretary. We are exploring options for an integrated, more collaborative, investigative process. And, you know, may look for, you know, particular cases coming from any of the inputs and any of the agencies, but look for, you know, cases where all of us can engage together. You know, we are working on what those opportunities might be and where they might come from. But obviously the predicate for all of that is being able to share the information so that we're not just siloed over here with labor and industry doing its thing here and MIA doing its thing over here and comptroller and UI doing each thing in its own kind of room in the hotel. We want to kind of just be all in the lobby together, if that makes sense. And that is why the information sharing and data sharing is so incredibly crucial. I do want to shout out to our lawyers as well as the AAGs from all of the other agencies, but our lawyers in particular, Sarah and Jenny, have done a tremendous amount of work, both trying to figure out what the information is, where it's located, what form it is, you know, what the restrictions are on sharing it, and then God knows how, actually try to put together something that, you know, both addresses the confidentiality limitations and enables all the partners in the agency to use the information as necessary in the investigative process. So I know there's active discussions around that are underway with all of the respective attorneys general. And I just want to say how much we appreciate that work. And of course, the work of all of their counterparts of their agencies. So a follow-up meeting is planned. We've met twice so far. The next time, I won't starve people, and we'll Venmo each other for pizza, but that's June 13th. We've been holding the meetings from 12 to 2, and I don't eat breakfast, so I starved everybody. Sorry about that. That will change in the next meeting. But it's been a real pleasure to get to know all of the enforcement staff group, and I think we're all eager to work together and try to figure out how to mesh and how to make our programs together more effective.
Any questions, feedback, observations based on the discussion so far in response to Commissioner Burke's update?
I have a question. When your department finds that a business has misclassified its employees, do you order them to get UI and workers' comp?
No, we don't, we advise, but we don't order.
Oh,
We
interesting.
make note of it,
Okay,
we bring it to their attention, but
Uh-huh.
we don't have that ability.
okay. Okay, because when we make that finding, we order them to get workers' compensation coverage. And then if they fail to do it within 30 days, there's additional penalties. Interesting, okay.
It's fascinating, like there's the identifying and then there's what are the
Right.
actual remedies that they
Yeah.
are different across
Very
agencies,
different.
and so that coordination is super important. Wonderful. Okay, well, next, and I don't know if this is slide-based or just, it's everything. Okay, so we had the agency snapshots, and these are visible for our online viewers, that you also should have them also in your packets. I believe. No, you don't have the packet. This is something else. You will have them as slides for your future reference, and obviously you don't need to read each entire slide, but wanted to just have a chance for each agency to have a few minutes to talk about how things look from their view of the world and what they're most focused on. So with that, let me turn it over to our esteemed current and former colleague, Leonard Howe.
Good morning. Thank you for having it first. Just have to jump out for just a second and jump right back into the meeting. But the Office of the Attorney General, I guess the best way to characterize it is that we are entering the business of focusing on widespread systemic worker protection activities. It has come to us naturally through 4 units that we have. We have a false claims unit that has received complaints over the years of contractors who have submitted claims largely on construction projects, and their payment records aren't quite up to speed. In many cases, shocking, that's right. In many cases, they've just flat out fabricated them. So that brings that activity under the view of our false claims unit, who will look at wrongdoing in contracting largely. So contractors submit wage records, payment records, and they don't match who's actually on the ground. So we go after them in that context. We also have a fraud and corruption unit as part of our criminal division. Though we get into the wage protection activities in that context, in cases where you have labor trafficking, you have other really hardcore labor violations. And then all you have to do is turn a page or two, and then you see that people are not being paid what they were supposed to be paid. So we have that authority to just to investigate and seek remedies under that area as well. We have a newly minted civil rights division just created over the past year. They've largely up to speed right now in staffing, but they are already seeing discrimination complaints coming in, Civil Rights Division, you would expect that based on age, gender, race, ethnicity. But already we have seen cases where the discrimination also includes some discrepancies in pay, what people are owed. And then again, you turn the page and what do you see? You see people are paying below the table, under the table. They're not paying minimum wage where they're supposed to. They're not paying, they're violating on many different aspects. So we have these independent really looks into what's going on in that space. And what Attorney General Brown wanted to do was to make sure that we are coordinated internally and using the longstanding federal approach of a tiger team to have a dedicated unit that's focused on understanding what our existing units are doing and providing additional resources to them, but also looking forward to this process, Joint Enforcement Task Force, and making sure that we have resources in place that can facilitate, help to support this process as well, because we fully anticipate, as you can see on our information on the board, fully anticipate that really embracing the no wrong door approach to these issues so that we will receive issues and guaranteed there will be some wage and hour issues, there'll be some workplace fraud issues, worker misclassification issues, and to have this as a body to share that information, that's really central to what he's been thinking of as well. So we're in the process of interviewing for a senior attorney and an investigator, starting off small tiger team, but with the intent of building up, and that team is going to reside within our Consumer Protection Division for reporting purposes. But but the intent is to let that unit grow, learn, and then we'll see. We'll just see how systemic some of these violations are, and we know that many of them are quite systemic. Hence, we have the 2009 law, right? Mm-hmm. So that's in a nutshell what the OAG is doing.
Questions? We'll turn to our Deputy Comptroller, Maria Robodino.
Yes, great morning, task force members. I'm here, I have the honor to represent Controller Brooke Learman today. And I want to first thank Secretary Wu, Commissioner Burke, and the amazing staff here that have made this possible and have convened us and have started this important work. I just want to say one thing, conveying Controller Learman's sentiment. Partnerships are important. When we talk about financial crimes and workplace fraud, most of the times we see like a little bit of a piece in this puzzle from our vantage points. Yet these fraudulent activities really have a ripple effect on our state. And so, timely information, in targeted use of investigative enforcement resources can make a huge difference. And so we remain committed to this collaboration and this partnership with you all. So the task force, as you know, has started already on the collaboration process to stop worker victimization. And Maryland's Department of Labor has convened, as you heard, enforcement teams. And at this point, I want to thank my colleague, Matt Bauman, who is our Assistant Chief Auditor and has been part of these meetings. And so we have been convening enforcement teams, honestly, just to try to figure out what are the mechanisms each organization has and start actually imagining how these resources, can make a difference in how enforcement could look like. Through this work, we're learning from each other. We are building the relationships and the trust we need to do this work. And that, I want to say, that is a really important first step so that we can continue to keep on relentlessly looking for avenues and vehicles to collaborate. So our legal teams have also met, right? With Maryland Department of Labor legal team and the Controller's Office. And we have encountered many, many questions and challenges, and we keep on going through them. But the good news is that we have a draft MOU that we are looking at between our organizations. And we hope to have more, and we hope to figure out what the questions are with all of you and what else can we create and together, what other agreements can take place. So as far as, well, I'm not sure if there's a slide, but I can tell you, as far as the data sharing goes, right? In general terms, the controller's office could contribute the following information regarding entities that are determined to have committed workplace fraud or that are fraud leads, right? And these are state electronic 1099G, state electronic 1099R, state electronic 1099 state tax, combined registration data, business tax return data. Now, for all of the data I just listed and mentioned, the controller's office may disclose only the data, may only disclose this data if we have in place a data use and sharing authorization agreement executed between controller and any of the participants here, right? So in order to, for these data to be shared interagencies, you were barred by many different, as you know, many different safeguards. We must do it in a way that is anonymized to the extent possible, consistent with the information intended use, and also that it will be subject to protections and safeguards set forth by the controller in written authorization, as well as Internal Revenue Service and federal data tax that is protected by safeguards as well, as you know. And finally, redisclosure of this information, of this tax information, is generally prohibited after that use. So disposal of the information we share also plays a role here. And so just a word or two in regards to the future of what we see coming up and what we would like to work together with you all. You know, it would be really beneficial for the controller's office to have any and all information available in any state agency that relates to total payments made to workers who are misclassified. This is our big, important piece of the puzzle we don't know how to share, don't know how to figure out. So again, total payments made to workers who are misclassified. At this point, it appears that Department of Unemployment Insurance and Labor and Industry have a lot of what we want, but we were wondering maybe workers' compensation and who else could help us figure out this total amount, right? So that we can work on enforcement actions. We could also potentially benefit from any data that helps us identify those who are not properly registered for Maryland withholding taxes. So looking into the future, right? We hope that our task force works on education. Education is starting with us. On prior workplace enforcement task forces, for example, some of the experiences in Illinois and New Jersey, we've been talking to some of them, and we want to understand what are the nationwide best practices that we can learn from, and we don't recreate the wheel, right? So we encourage our task force to do this research to adopt those national best practices to combat workplace fraud. And then finally, and then also education to the public and businesses, right? That should be part of our plan because businesses need to know what are the consequences of committing these crimes, and also they need to know what are the incentives, right? And finally, I would include prevention in the future of our work. Prevention is really important. We don't have to catch the bad guys after the fact. We can actually prevent and incentivize businesses to abide by the law. So, and also finally, we want to start as soon as possible. I know that's hard, but we're working as fast as we can to be able to take on, for example, one target together and see how it works and learn from it, right? I mean, a lot of this experience is going to be helpful to fine tune the way we work in the future. And so just that, I'll leave you with that, and that it will take a coordinated and deliberate effort from all of us, and that we're ready to partner and do this work hand in hand with you. Thank you.
Questions or comments, Maria? I have a question, actually two questions. One, through some of our other work with the comptroller's office, actually around some of these support programs, it came to our attention that getting information to verify 1099s, like the comptroller for some reason seem to, like, it's 2024 now, like, we have to look back to like 2022. Now, maybe that's a different situation for individual records versus aggregate as you spoke about, but I was wondering, and I know you may not be able to answer these now, Maria, but it seems like for future conversations, this might be useful, is like understanding the time lag, and I know there always is one with tax filing.
Yeah.
And it's related to my second question, which is, super excited to see the comptroller taking its initial steps with some of its new tax filing system work. I'm sorry, it's got a cute name.
Maryland Tax Connect.
And like, it seems like that could potentially be a very powerful tool because you're going to have all of your systems sort of integrated in a different way. And I know one of the goals of that tool is to pick up all these individuals who are being paid in theory on a 1099, but it's the tax isn't being reported, right? So I think we're curious to understand, as you all, and I understand this is like a multi-year project, but as you're going forward on that, like, what's the mechanism y'all are thinking of using to get that information to flow to you more directly, and trying to understand how that might be beneficial for task force members to understand, okay, look, we're seeing all these 1099s in this area. Doesn't seem like that's a typical independent contractor relationship, that's a flag. I don't know if that'll be possible at some time. It seems like those might be areas to.
Thank you for that, Secretary Wu. Those are two good questions that the answers lie in a couple of experts in my office, and I may not have an answer for you unless Matt can weigh in on the time lag piece. And then the new filing system, I will confer with Andy Shuffle from our office. He's leading this work, and get back to you, because you're absolutely right. This could have implications on how fast and how much information can we get and potentially share.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I don't have any definite timelines for those. The timeline, some of that depends largely if they don't file, and it's not reported in there, then the timeline could be longer. We can definitely check with our Revenue Administration Division and get you more of a precise timeline if everything is filed correctly and up to date when it would be available. Because there's different filings.
So I could sort of add to that. So Jonathan, with the Department of Assessment Taxation, we sort of have an MOU with you guys for our tax credits, and we back into their system. The IRS is always like 2 years behind giving them and then us data. So we're still auditing for certain tax credits 7 years back. And we're approaching this deadline where we're trying to get our teams to work, expeditiously, because if we don't complete these audits soon, it goes away for the statewide tax credits, the homeowners and the renters tax credit. So that's something that we also are struggling on, because our data is so, it's not their fault, it's the IRS that gets things so late. And then we also have had server issues with Do It. But other than that.
It says the 1099s go up to the feds, and then they have to like boomerang.
And we don't collect any information directly. And also what further complicates things is our definition of income is different than the comptrollers for our program. So we're also working with two different definitions of income, but we're experiencing that too. Not because of them, it's a great system, it's just because the IRS is super slow sometimes.
I hadn't truly focused on that until recently, so it's helpful to understand. Thank you. Actually, do we want to go straight to SSAT? We're going a little out of order. Oh wait, is there order in the slides? Oh, sorry.
Don't mess with those slides,
All right. There you go. Okay, yes, please.
Technology. Got you set up.
Yes, I can start. So I always like to give the disclaimer that SSAT has no enforcement power. So that's the first of my disclaimer for everyone. Now, what we can do is if the comptroller, if labor, if someone tells us that we should pull a business's charter, we do that. We put holds on businesses, but that hold is only good for as much as the business needs something from SSAT. And the only valuable thing that we have that businesses need is what's called the good standing certificate.
That's right.
And we encourage more and more agencies to request a good standing certificate from any business that's doing business with them. And again, it's only as powerful as we make it. Most banks require it to open up a bank account. Do banks continuously require them to remain in good standing? Not really. There's not a whole lot of checks. So That's really our only tool that we have at our disposal. Most, but not all businesses are required to come to SSTAT first. Before you go to the comptroller, before you go to the IRS, get your EIN, you're starting with SSTAT to make sure that your name is even available in the state of Maryland. And if your name is not available, if you want to open up Joe's Hamburger Stand, that already might be existing in Maryland, but you say, hey, look, I started in Texas. I'm also Joe's Hamburger Stand. Then we find a name for you that works in Maryland, and you'll take that name in Maryland, then you get your EIN, then you do the combined registration with the comptroller and get all your other accounts. So that's really SSTAT's this giant filing cabinet. Pretty much all of our documents are available to the public on our website. They're obviously available to you guys. The only thing that would not be available to the public, which if someone needed it, we could figure out a way to get it to you guys, is businesses with over $20,000 in personal property. So personal property is, like this table would be personal property, this building would be real property, so not the building. In certain counties have to file a personal property report with us. Certain counties they don't, and certain municipalities they don't. But those individuals, that back-end data is proprietary to the businesses, so that wouldn't be on our website. But everything else about the businesses is on their website, their principal address in the state, any addresses that they use in the state, and also their, Maryland has one of the strictest policies for a principal office address. Most other states you can use a P.O. box. You actually need to have a physical place in Maryland where a document can be served to the business. And that is also on our website. So those 3 addresses could be useful for enforcement mechanisms because those are the addresses hopefully the businesses will be using. One more thing for everyone to note, it is in the business's interest to have an accurate address with SSTAT. Because if the business cannot be served, if they cannot be found, and then they're sued, they're gonna have a default judgment against the businesses. These businesses want to be alerted as quickly as possible that they're being served. So that's why our address at SSTAT is usually pretty accurate for the business. So that's just something else to consider. But that's, this is all a very small part of SSTAT. Majority of SSTAT is assessing property. So this isn't what we do most of it. So, yep, so that's that.
Thank you. Maybe we'll go back to our order. We'll go up to Labor and Industry. Commissioner Burke.
I have, before I get into it, can I have a question for SSTAT, actually?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding it correctly, I've been on the SSTAT website and kind of scrolled around a little bit. You can't search by every field, right? So like, say incorporators are part of what a business has to list on the charter or on the registration documents. If I wanted to know how many businesses does, Faith Burke have in Maryland that she's associated with in some way, I can't do that on SSTAT.
So we don't
right?
track ownership of business entities.
Or like incorporators or agents or, whatever, personnel. Do they also have to have officers and stuff?
Yeah, we don't track officers. So all of those things, unfortunately, are often scanned documents.
Yeah.
So you have to, our system isn't sophisticated enough to try to cross-reference those. There are things, right now, there's 2 ways that the public can search on our website. One is by SSTAT ID number, which is not your EIN, and not the number the comptroller uses. Everyone has their own number. SSTAT ID number or business name. If you want to search by resident agent or something like that, we can probably do that on the back end if it's another government agency requesting it. If the public wants it, we actually send them to a third party. We have a third party on our website because we don't have our own IT staff anymore. We just have to use Do It. So they don't have the capability to search those things for customers. So we just have a link and they got to pay, it's called Spec Print. You got to pay Spec Print. Spec Print will search for you our records. We don't offer public services like that. But you guys probably figured out. We would actually, what we would do is we would tell Spec Print to waive their fee. You'd still go through Spec Print, but if anyone had a question about it, we would just waive that fee that Spec Print charges. But you're right, it's not a great system.
There's a lot of information there,
You
just
just
not
can't
necessarily
find it.
all of it is, is searchable by field, as
Right.
noted.
Yep.
So if you know what you're looking for, it's ACEs. If you're not 100% sure and you want to kind of look around, it's a little harder to.
We're much further behind the comptroller in our Technology.
We're all
There we go.
I'll pass that on.
So, sorry.
Oh, whenever you're finished. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jonathan. So you have to have a brick and mortar when you form your LLC. Do you ever check back?
No.
Okay.
No, we never check
So if
back.
somebody has it, then they
We never
they
check
let it
back.
go.
We don't, yeah.
Okay.
And also,
I'm just thinking about our enforcement plans down the road.
and also the brick and mortar could be a service of process company. So it's not always like a truly
Oh,
like,
maybe that's good.
like brick and mortar. I think on
Was that your
St. Paul's
question too?
Street, there's like
That's funny.
tens of thousands of businesses that are registered, so it's not always that.
Uh-huh.
Technically, I believe the law says the place that you store the business documents. Now, who's
Oh.
actually storing physical business documents anymore? Nobody. But I think that's what the law says, yeah. So that's.
Sorry, labor and industry. So we have a number of different programs that sort of touch on workplace or worker misclassification, workplace fraud in one way or another. Our division houses the actual workplace fraud unit, which is responsible for enforcing the 2009 law, which prohibited misclassification in construction and landscape, created a process and a methodology by which to determine employee status versus independent contractor status. So we have that unit, we get inputs through that unit, and we investigate through that unit. We have our employment standards unit, which enforces wage and hour laws throughout the state. The Healthy Working Family Sick and Safe Leave law, the minimum wage laws, the overtime laws, all of those, the wage payment and collection law, all of those are laws that are enforced by our division, and all of those are potential inputs for incidences of worker misclassification. Someone, is coming to us saying that they haven't been paid, and we learn that they were either paid as a 1099, but they are not in, at least in a traditional, more traditional 1099 sort of work occupational group, or they get paid in cash or under the table. Again, potential inputs, both to our workplace fraud unit, if those are landscaping or construction, but also sort of more generally incidences potentially of worker misclassification. So we get inputs through there. Probably the largest tranche of information we have in our unit is in the certified payroll records that are submitted through a prevailing wage enforcement unit. Prevailing wage is a law that is applicable to state contracts or state-funded contracts of a certain amount with a certain threshold of state fund participation. And contractors who work on those contracts are required to submit and certify that they are true, complete, accurate, et cetera, records of all of the payroll for all of the persons who worked on the project. And they're required to do that, I believe it's 14 days after the end of the pay period. So with the number of publicly funded projects that we have, that's a large tranche of information. Now, a lot, the payroll records themselves show what they show, wages, deductions, fringe benefits, et cetera. So they're sort of, they may, they are really only helpful in the context of an investigation where, say, you have a contractor and, the information you're getting from the field is different, say, than what's on the certified payroll record. But we do have those wage records. Similarly, we have certified payroll records for living wage contracts, which are state service contracts, again, with subject to certain thresholds, et cetera. But we receive, that's not in a database of any kind, that's just through email, and then stored on our drives. That's also a tranche of information that we have. And potential inputs, again, into the workplace, the whole issues of worker misclassification. And the last one is our Maryland Occupational Safety and Health Program, which is responsible for safety and health for both private and public sector workers throughout the state. This is when our inspectors go out to sites, one of the issues, because the law protects employees, one of the issues that they are interested in, and one of the defenses that sometimes is raised is that those people on the roof are not my employees. They are all independent contractors, so the fact that they're not tied off is not on me. And so there's a process for determining whether or not, again, under our MOSH law, we're determining whether those people on the roof are in fact employees or more likely to be independent contractors. And that dovetails, although not perfectly, with our workplace fraud work, with our wage and hour work, et cetera, because employee status is a little bit different, sometimes more than a little bit different, as between laws even within our unit. And I know that there are some differences also between the definitions of employees under some of those laws and, say, employee status for purposes of tax law or employee status for purposes of workers' comp law or unemployment insurance law. So, these are some of the things, again, that the enforcement group has been sharing with one another that has been certainly very helpful for me as a newcomer to the Joint Enforcement Task Force process to understand. But those are things that we're going to have to grapple with, because each one of these laws was kind of made for its own particular purpose. And that purpose didn't really have anything to do, other than the Workplace Fraud Act, with worker misclassification. So those are sort of all of the basic inputs that we get in our division and the sort of kinds of things that we have. We have closed cases on, on all of those, from all of those units on many different fronts. Some of them may or may not be, again, appropriate for, a larger discussion within the task force. But we've used, a couple of the Workplace Fraud Act cases to kickstart and generate ideas for our enforcement group discussions. So, and we, hope to continue to do that. And we hope to get inputs from others as well, so that we see how it presents in each one of the agencies, and then we figure out how to work together to make it right.
Questions for Commissioner Burke?
Okay, so obviously, labor and industry is the arm at labor that has like the sort of the strongest enforcement pull, or one of the biggest and certainly broadest enforcement remits in this area. But we also have the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing and Division of Unemployment Insurance. So Commissioner Dunn.
Occupational professional licensing, we license and we regulate many areas. I'll use home improvement because I just came from a meeting about home improvement, and those areas are rife. I mean, absolutely rife for workplace fraud. So, we don't collect a lot of information. Usually it's just names, business type entities. So we would absolutely need more authority to collect more information. I know that's been something that we requested in the past, that we still need to really think if it's necessary. If we do discover what we believe is workplace fraud, we go to our partners over at Labor and Industry. So pretty much everything shuttles over to them. We recommend them take a look at whatever comes in. If we get a call from an employee, or we get a call from some anonymous person suggesting that, it would go to Labor and Industry. So for us, we would need a change in statute to really give us more authority to collect more information, to maybe look underneath the hood, or if, Labor and Industry recommends, we need to suspend somebody's license if they're continually doing this in their business, or, just give us authority to actually regulate that would be what we'd be looking for in the future.
John, can you mentioned home improvement. Can you remind us, like, in some cases your boards are licensing individuals. So like I have my professional license. In fact, that's typically the case, right? It's not firms or business licenses, because sometimes there's a confusion about that.
Most times it's individuals, but we do have, in home improvement, we absolutely have businesses. So we have pools, we have, painters, we have all those. And they usually use, I would bet you money, a lot of 1099s, or say they're 1099s that they're utilizing to work for those businesses.
Questions for It's interesting, this sort of like, our tools are only built for one use, right? Like so many of these places, now we figured out, oh gosh, there could be uses across everybody. So unemployment insurance.
So I'm going to question back, since she's been working on this.
We get a lot of asks for data from everybody here. And we provide data as required by our MOUs and there was an application, and I think we talked to Devki about it, where it was an application that we collaborated and there were reports that were sent out. So it was an application that we put our data in and then everybody put their data in and reports were completed in it, correct? Is that, my question to everybody here, because as you know, I am new, is that still up and running? Is that application still, is it Do It? Who's in charge of it?
There's actually a demonstration after
Labor
this
IT
section,
was.
Labor IT was, okay.
which she's discussing is.
Thank you. So we are happy to data share, given our legal requirements. As we all know, we've had conversations about that as well. And we'd like to collaborate. My main question, and this is something that Rachel and I talked about yesterday, what is the data that the task force members are looking for? Because we are only as good as our audits. The way we find misclassifications is through auditing, through our field investigation unit, right? We do about 1% of the employers we audit a year. It's not a lot. There are several ways that we audit. We look at how many employers are not reporting wages or reporting a large number of independent, or we can only look at an employer if a claim has been filed and there's a wage dispute. If a claimant files for unemployment insurance and no wages are attached, we will look at that and say, there's something going on here, there's no wages attached. The employer can come back and say they're an independent contractor. So that is how we get the heads up. We also may get a heads up from other agencies throughout the state, labor and industry especially, right? You may come to us and say, there's a problem here. So that's reporting to UI, and then we will do an audit. Don't audit a lot, as you know. We don't audit a lot of employers because of how our process works. So enforcement is also, how do you enforce that? The job of unemployment insurance is really to get the taxes, right, into the trust fund and make sure the employers are paying their taxes on wages. And so when we audit, then there's taxes that need to be paid.
So part of this conversation also could be, how do we ourselves get flagged based on the data that we can get, that we can share? How do we flag more industries, more businesses that we can go and say, hey, there's more, because they are required to provide these taxes. The one question that Meg talked about yesterday that I really identify with is, especially if a claimant is filing a claim for unemployment insurance, and the employer comes back and said, no, not really, this was 1099 person. That's a huge red flag. So I think part of the conversation would be, how do we get ourselves ahead of all of that to kind of say, hey, here are these industries or employers that we want to reach back out with and say, on our side, let's figure out how to put them on a list that we are constantly reviewing and increase our process for auditing, because I think there is a lot of value to it that's going to allow us to eliminate fraud as we move forward.
And if I can ask.
And one more thing I wanted to add in the conversation, based on what I've heard also, it appears, and we are in a very similar situation when it comes to data sharing legal requirement. So one of the things I think I would recommend, maybe part of the work that we're doing, is identifying one standard maybe MOU that we all use that covers all of our legal requirements, so we all know, so we're not negotiating with one entity about this MOU and that MOU, what the content is that we want to create. We know we want to make sure that we are safeguarding the PII information that we are getting, that only certain people could access certain things. There are certain requirements we have to meet, but in order to be more effective, I think it might be something to think about. It's like, how do we develop one standard MOU that we all could use for sharing of information? Just a thought.
Questions of other?
I have,
questions.
I actually have a question for the group. I have, as we've been talking about this amongst ourselves in labor, there's always, we want UI data. So when you ask us for that, the purpose behind the UI data as it relates to your particular agency or division, we have employers that pay taxes based on the wages that they report. So what is the use of that data for you? I'm gonna.
Okay, I can answer that.
That'd
For
be
our
great.
agency,
That'd
yeah.
be great.
Oh, yeah, let me tell you what we're gonna, because we do actually have a lot of sort of judicial types of powers.
Right.
And we're gonna take that UI data and we're gonna bring in businesses who have UI, but we don't have any proof that they have workers' comp coverage. So we have the power to civilly prosecute them. And it's the best gotcha evidence ever, because it's like, oh, you have UI, they must be an employee. Employer, yeah. So here's the order to go get workers' comp coverage. And I don't want to keep focusing on the injured worker, because yes, we do, that's part of our mission, but we also have these enforcement powers against employers. So every time we bring a worker, into the system, we expand the whole social safety net, and they're no longer a misclass worker or somebody being paid completely under the table. They become an employee with, rights and benefits.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Trilene, did you want to answer for labor and
Sure,
industry?
there are a couple of instances. There could be a worker who was a 1099 worker, and we determined that worker was actually an employee, and they may have been denied UI benefits because of that. There are instances where we are doing an investigation and we are trying to determine whether or not that employee actually worked for that employer. That's another way. The employer, or matching up wages, W-2s could be wrong, things like that. So there are very, very numerous ways that we use that information.
Thank you.
It's a cross-check. It's a very helpful cross-check, because it's also individual to the worker, right? It's got the worker's name and, to the extent that or at least one of the first three letters of the name or something, but it actually shows kind of who the employer acknowledged and paid on during any given quarter. And that's, again, as a cross-check, very helpful for all of our labor and industry.
Thank you. Thank you for educating me. I appreciate that.
I mean, I think, from a comptroller's perspective on what we would do with your information, basically, again, we're trying to find out how much was someone actually paid and was the proper withholding taxes withheld from that. So if you have records that indicate a tax or a employee was paid one amount, our records indicate another amount, we would hold the business responsible for the withholding taxes on any differences. Also as a way of saying, verifying again, they are an employee and not a subcontractor, right? And that's one of the things that I think our enforcement groups have also been talking about is, if someone's already gone out and vetted this, that someone is a employee and not a subcontractor, that the other agencies shouldn't have to go out and vet that same information all over again. We should be able to use that information. And again, in the comptroller's perspective, it's what was someone paid. I think some of the other agencies only get a portion of the total of the wages that were paid and not the entire wages that were paid. And statutorily, we can go back and assess for 3 years of wages that were paid. If fraud is prevalent, we can go back up to 10 years. So finding out the total payments, that's a huge part for the comptroller's office. So when we say we want any data that you have, any agency has that relates to total payments, it's very difficult for us to work with just one pay stub or one instance or one citation. So anything, you all know your data better than we do at this point. Anything you have in regards to total wages, we are very interested in.
Can I add one more thing? Another reason why we may use it is to be able to locate the employer. Because, you know, we may have ABC company and we may have to ask that information, but it doesn't match up with what you actually have. And what you actually have, we've been able to actually collect wages by tracking down an employer or attorney filing suit.
Terrific, this is exactly what we wanted to generate from this conversation, is like
Right.
more information sharing and greater understanding of what sister agencies do and what tools they have. Let's go to the Associate Commissioner, MA.
Hi, I'm Joy Hatchett with the Maryland Insurance Administration, sitting in for Commissioner Kathleen Brain. And our agency is a little bit different than everybody else. We are the agency that regulates the insurance industry. So in order to do the business of insurance in the state of Maryland, you have to be licensed and regulated through us. Now, we have a fraud division, and the insurers are required to report if they have suspected insurance fraud. We also have a tip line where individuals, including employees, can contact us if they believe there is insurance fraud. Now, generally speaking, we have not seen any complaints about misclarification, but through and we have extensive investigative authority, so we have the ability to suspend licenses of individuals that are producers that sell insurance, but also companies. And through our fraud investigations, there's a potential that we could learn of something that might be of interest to your different agencies. And that's why one of the things that our fraud unit would like to have a better understanding of, and we hope that this will lead to better understanding of what your different agencies do and how we can better partner throughout. Because I think all of us have different investigative teams, and honestly, we don't know what each other does. And so part of this, hopefully, is if we have a better understanding, then as our fraud team is out there gathering information, maybe there are some questions that we should be asking. Or maybe there's information that you guys have that we could come to you and ask for. So I think while right now, just looking at what we have in our database of information, there's nothing there, but that doesn't mean that there isn't information that could be there.
Questions?
I have a question. So do you license people to sell insurance? That's what I thought.
So-
And do you give them a test?
So we license the companies. So the companies have, so your State Farms, your Care First, all of them, that company has to meet financial requirements.
Okay.
But individuals, you guys call them agents, we call them producers.
Oh, okay.
They have to be licensed. They have to take a test. They have to complete CE requirements. They have to do all of that, and it's agents, public adjusters. We don't deal with the contractors, but we get lots of complaints about contractors. So it's all of those folks that deal in the insurance business?
Yeah, I'm asking that because one of the things we've talked about is better education of the insurance agents, because they're leaving money on the table. They're there to sell a business a policy, and the business is saying, oh, yeah, all my people are independent contractors. Well, maybe with a little better education and a little bit of a deeper dive into the business model, that agent could say, I'm sorry, but these workers are actually employees. They're not independent. You need to buy a policy. So, and I go back to what Attorney General Brown said at our launch meeting. He said, please look at the statutes and the regulations that you already have on the books before you pick up the drafting pen and ask the legislature for some new laws. Because that's tough, getting a new law, and we saw what happened with the watering down of the statute last time. So, so I'm just thinking about ways that we can change the dynamic here through means that don't require legislative action.
So the things that are included on their exams are specific to insurance. So it's your homeowner's policy, these are the types of things. And so you can get a license in property and casualty, which is the which is the auto, the home, or you can get a license for life and health. As to selling life insurance, health insurance, I'm not quite sure where the employee piece, whether or not this person is an employee or I'm just not sure how that would fit.
Should be part of the test.
But what I'm saying is I don't know necessarily if that fits within the guidelines of the test, because our tests, first of all, you can't ask but so many things. I mean, you've got to limit it.
Right.
And also, we're trying to make sure that when they sell a homeowner's policy, they understand the homeowner's policy versus that employee piece. I mean, it's you've got to figure out what you're focusing on.
Yeah, for us, when we had certain issues with enlightening folks on diversity, equity, inclusion, we included that in their continued education. So this may be an area where we could put that when they're required CEs, they could possibly have it in that area.
At the very least, I'd say it's your organization convenes and has information, right, about a very key player, right, in this whole system, right? To the extent that we are able to leverage that contact information even and piggyback on either continuing education or, another appropriate forum to reach out to people, educate them about this issue. I understand your point, which is that it's very much in their interest to understand this landscape, because the more people who are insured, right, and the more insurance there is, the more the insurance agent is benefited, as well as the workers and the employers. So there's a consonance of interest there.
And where it actually may fit better is that notifying the agents. So these are because we do consumer advisory, agency advisories all the time. So not making it a part of the CE, but we send notices about new laws to the different agents. So maybe sending out something to them, make sure that you advise your clients about X, Y, and Z. It may be more appropriate there as opposed to making it a CE requirement, because the CE requirements have really we're really trying to push and make sure they understand the product. And if you load it with too much, then you basically water down what you want them to be their focus. But I don't see any reason why we could not do something in conjunction with you. I mean, we've done things with Home Improvement Commission, basically just advising them, this is something that you need to know about.
Unless at any point you revisit your curriculum, you could include that in part of your curriculum.
And
For the initial course.
we are constantly trying to add things, and it's tough. It's
But it's gonna help them make more money.
well, sometimes just because they're making more money isn't protecting the consumer.
That's fair. Actually, I want to turn to the chair to give the last update, and then we'll have a little transition. Actually, let's turn to the chair first, and then I'll do a couple marks, because I think we need to transition to the portal presentation.
Yeah, okay, sure. Just on the slideshow, I've already explained what we're gonna do with the UI data. The SDAT data on newly formed LLCs, we're gonna work with them, not so much in the judicial sense, but we're gonna make sure they make those elections that they need to make with respect to choosing to either be exempt from workers' comp or to select it. So, again, back to what Attorney General Brown said, we've really taken this to heart, and we've taken a look at our internal operations over the last 11 weeks. And we've enhanced the training of our existing staff to ensure better courtroom outcomes in our employer compliance cases, and we'll continue to do that. We are investigating a business practice, and hopefully not a widespread one, but it's in the construction and home improvement businesses. And we've uncovered businesses that don't hire individuals anymore. They only hire other businesses, and particularly LLCs. And this practice is designed to do an end run around the misclassification laws by creating the appearance that these are just two arm's length businesses negotiating a contract with each other. But of course, we suspect that the deeper motive is to be an end run around the immigration laws, because the company can hire the undocumented worker by creating an LLC for them, and this dispenses with the whole need to even inquire about the legal status of any individual worker. So we are in the very early stages of investigating this business practice, and we would ask for your assistance on anything that you might know about this. Lastly, we want to share with you a provision in our code, Labor and Employment 1-202, and it prohibits a governmental unit, and I want to make you think about counties and municipalities. They're barred from issuing a permit or a license to any employer who might have employees unless they have either a workers' comp policy binder or a certificate of compliance from our agency. And we have reason to believe that county and local governments are not complying with this law. Yeah, so we think this is where the action really needs to be, because this is where the misclassification is, and this is where the injuries routinely occur. So the bigger question is, how do we stop all of these county and city permit offices from giving the permits to electricians and plumbers and home builders? So we have two future steps in mind. One is to reach out to the city and county attorneys and try and find out whether they are complying with this law. And second, to try and develop an enforcement plan, possibly with the help of MACO and MML. But I want to just emphasize, that we were to suddenly decide that we were going to try and enforce this law, we would meet massive resistance because of upheaval in the county permitting offices when all of a sudden license couldn't be issued and small businesses couldn't be able to start projects. And then the most important thing is the Workers' Comp Commission just does not have the clout to make this happen. So we would really need the full weight of the Comptroller's office, the AG's office, and the Department of Labor if we were to actually enforce this provision in our code. And it certainly would take a lot of planning, but it is where the action is, because it's a lot of small businesses who have workers. So we really are in this together.
If I might just add on
Yeah.
the previous comment on where you are in your initial investigations. In our world, it's the labor broker issue that
Yes.
we're dealing with.
Mhm.
And I know I just had a briefing recently by members of a union, just talking about how widespread it is. I know that they've filed complaints with labor here. But when I go to national conferences, it's a well, national, but more importantly, regional. Maryland, unfortunately, is kind of the wild, wild west for that activity right now. We're not really present in trying to aggressively go after them yet. So we're at the beginning stages as well, but I would offer that that's something that collectively we need to talk about, have our agenda, because we each have vantage points that will come into enforcement on. It's not just about misclassification. There are so many other things, areas of the law that they're violating. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, we're just ripe right now.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. We seem to be one of the last ones.
Maryland also,
And they say we're so anti-business. I never get that.
we also don't recognize series LLCs. So that's a new type of LLC that other states use, where one LLC owns another LLC. That's just not something that we recognize. There's no such thing in Maryland as a
Okay.
series LLC, just like there's no such thing as a.
Do you think that's a good thing? I guess I'm not sure.
I don't know, but that might affect what you're talking about, where, I mean, if you're saying that it's one LLC is going to business with another one, but like, I don't know enough about that. We don't recognize lots of entity types that other states have, like a foreign real estate investment trust. If you ever heard of a REIT, we only have domestic REITs. We don't recognize other people's REITs. So, I don't know.
And unfortunately, a lot of these practices, these aren't just private sector activities. These construction companies are using these arrangements on government-funded projects.
Oh.
And then they're doing, it's on one hand, it looks transparent, but it's transparent because we haven't really dug down deep as to what they're actually doing, the practices that they have. And will switch from broker to broker. So on one hand, the agents, and I put this in our notes, our agency, the government's agencies, procurement offices, whoever the contract monitors are, there's an aggressive role that they need to play in monitoring this activity that will help feed back information to us. And that's something that, a perspective that I don't know that we have at the table right now. But once we create the messaging, then it's, chief procurement officers unite, right?
Right.
Really thinking about how the state, investments and county and local government investments are, supporting these practices or not. Like, it's really important. There needs to be sunshine going down to a couple layers there.
And then also what we know is that because, the prime will contract with this LLC to actually conduct the work, the LLCs are, we're familiar with a whole lot of them. They are members of our boards and commissions here. So that's, we have some uncomfortable conversations ahead of us in that area, I would imagine.
You all need to transition. I will take a minute to just say, first of all, thank you very much. I think it was a really fruitful discussion. There's a sub-agency at Labor that is not represented on this list, but sort of coming online, and I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about family and medical leave insurance. Of course, we work closely with MIA on this, but that's an interesting program because it is supposed to cover not only W-2 employees, but self-employed individuals by design under statute. And I do think it's an opportunity, as there is with any new program, to think about, like, how does the information collection help us understand who's treated as a worker, who's not, what are the populations we're missing out there. And then I will finally say, having Maryland Department of Labor was responsible, I guess, since we last met. When was our last meeting? It was before the port thing, the British collapse of the port. Since in that time, we spent a lot of time working with a lot of port-related businesses and learning a lot more. And there are different industries where there's much higher concentration of independent contractors. For that response, we were providing support to both independent contractors and W-2 workers very intentionally, because there are a lot of individuals who are currently classified as independent contractors working at the port.
But I think that, it just helps us learn that there are real concentrations in different industries. And so, understanding what's going on there and how there's information specific to those industries that lives in, in that case, the port, and very specific federal statutory requirements and security requirements. They're totally different databases that are stood up around some of those industries. And of course, for health, for, insurance administration, there are many other, sub-pockets.
Okay, with that,
Still logging in.
Needed to.
We understand.
If anyone needs some water, get some water here. Anyone need a quick bio break, we can take a moment.
We are handling the death claims. Oh, so well coordinated, they're all, the claims are gonna come in at the same time, I'm gonna have one hearing with all the families and get it all over. Yes, yes.
are we ready?
Yes.
Just
Okay.
like that.
I'm gonna turn it over to Deja Desiree to walk us through the portal. I know last time, one of the things we talked about was, how can we use tools to make sure that we can share information? And I wanna give a shout out to the labor team who, it's not that we didn't have a portal, but need a little refreshing. And so, there's probably longer term investments in, more infrastructure in this vein, but I really think they've done a great job in sort of getting us back up and running on this and trying to find a tool that hopefully can be useful for everyone. Want to give you all just a top line preview. Happy to have deeper dives with some of you if you want to answer more questions at length. But Deja Desiree, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. So we wanted to have a conversation because we know that some of the enforcement staff, this has been a conversation, I think consistently here today, about security around information. How do we make sure that the information that's coming from various entities across interstate government, how is that information being protected? We know that certain folks have access to certain information, like I was very surprised that you have to be fingerprinted at the comptroller's office. Like that's because they now have access to certain information. So this portal has been live since the infancy of the previous iteration of the Joint Enforcement Task Force. So we are currently in a test link. This is not the link that you would receive once you all have access because of the privacy of the data that's currently in the system. So this is not the current information. So I'll start off by saying those who would have access, because there have been questions around security of information, so security, this, that, and the third, that information, people who would have access would be those that you assign. So it may be the principals at the table, it may be someone in your enforcement. That would be all for you to decide. I know that some of our AAGs have come to you and asked, like, who are your enforcement mechanisms or who would have access? That list, once we have, and I have a current list that we have, and I'll probably reach out after this to ensure that once you all have seen the portal, that answer may change for you about who should have access, who should have an account specifically for the AG, the Office of the Attorney General, and the Comptroller's Office. Like you all would need an MIA and workers' comp. We would have to get you all signed up on the labor network. This only exists like within labor. So there are certain folks who that actually has to be signed off by Secretary Wu. So that's one level of security, that there is a whole separate system about onloading your folks onto this. I believe the Comptroller's Office and workers' comp already does have an agreement, but we would just have to get the new names on there. So you all have. So this is the front page that you would see. And in front of you, I handed out a user's guide. So this guide is located right here. So you or whomever would have an account would have access to that guide. But for further, more in-depth information around the portal, you can find any and all questions have been answered in that guide. We're gonna go to creating a complaint. Probably the most substantive piece. So when you all, or in the past, what is kind of currently clunky with the portal is that it communicates to all the entities who have accounts, but it doesn't action it in a way. So you'd have to log in. There isn't an automatic action from the notice that you get. There's just a, hey, so-and-so has put in a complaint. It doesn't give you further actions from your email. So you would have to like be prompted, and it's not automatic. So there isn't an external system for the general public. So this information would come to your individual agencies, and you would have to be self-prompted to input it into the portal. And that's something that I think is a good conversation for later down the road, is how do we now start to integrate some of these systems as we look for further collaboration. And so you can see this is pretty much similar to what we have in our internal division and labor. I'm sorry if I'm shaking a little bit, I am freezing. And so this is a similar form to what we have, and I know some of the fields that were created were based on input from UI, the Comptroller's Office, and other agencies in the previous iteration.
Pause for a
Yes,
second,
ma'am.
Desiree. I am at labor. It occurs to me some people sitting further away might not be able to see it that well. Do you want to, a couple of us can switch out so you can get a little.
we have a chair.
closer?
If
We
you-
have the
We have a
handout.
chair up here.
Yeah, just, I'm using the handout.
Okay.
I can't see that, but I'm just.
No judgment, right there with you.
So, of course, when you open this, you would have a complaint number. So this would be complaint 1139. You would input the company's name, DBA name, telephone number, business owner, who's the supervisor, FEIN, the owner's social security. So like when we start talking about that information, that might be sensitive, that would live in here. But again, only certain people have access, business address, SDAT, location of work site, because it might be different. So we know that sometimes there are companies who have work sites in the state of Maryland, but their home offices are in other states. So that is important to know, correct? And then is it active now? This would pertain specifically because of the Workplace Fraud Act. Some of these, some of the wording is specifically to like most like construction pieces. Is it an active work site? Is this currently happening? What's the industry? So of course, not just only looking at construction, but we all also know that retail, service, hospitality, those other industries would be encompassed in this. And then what is the alleged fraudulent activity? And these items were picked by the previous task force. So paid off the books, workers' compensation, no unemployment insurance, paying the appropriate for overtime, not paying employees for all hours worked, minimum wage, not withholding taxes. So some of these may apply to you currently, they may not. These things could also be switched out. So as I go through, just be kind of thinking for later iterations, how can this form be changed if this is something that we want to pursue going into the future? Dates of occurrence to and from. So I'm sure all of us are collecting this information. So as you're inputting this into the system, this is what is pretty crucial. When I looked at previous complaints, a lot of this information is missing. So when we've talked to our individual agencies and our enforcement arms, it was really helpful as we think about integration and collaboration that we're putting substantive information, because we can only really kind of see where certain things overlap if all the information is included. So payroll, how's payroll being concealed? Does the complaint perform services? Does the complaint perform services? Of course, that information. Some of this information we have to have, and you'll see right there, it has the asterisk, and some of this information, because I know some of us do anonymous-based complaints, you don't have to have, right? So you don't have to have a complaint name. It's helpful. You don't have to have an address or telephone number. Also, very helpful. But these are things that if your agency doesn't have a practice because of the sensitivity of the information, or the person is scared, they don't want retaliation, though we do have a new anti-retaliation law. That is information that does not have to be in here. If you have any attachments that you want to upload, so if there are specific forms that you have that are not easily integrated into this, you can upload that into the system, and that would be attached as well. Any additional information? And then what do you plan on doing with the complaint? Are you gonna action it? Are you not gonna action it? Do you think this is odd, but there's not enough to go on, but this may be something, depending on the evolution of the task force, we might decide this portal is better used for, hey, this is a complaint we got. It wasn't enough for us to actually have a full or formal investigation, but where we are understanding where your statute ends, maybe someone else's statutory powers begin. So you might say no, if a joint, but you might feel like someone else needs to take this on. So the previous iteration of the task force said, if a joint investigation is requested, does your agency want to participate? So you might say, hey, yes, and we want to make sure everybody else is involved. You also can click that piece and you can add that information in. We do need an agency an agency contact, POC, and you would have to fill that information in as indicated by the asterisk, and then you would submit it, and then it would come to everyone who is assigned to the task force, gets an email. So right now, our internal IT team has been consistently doing tests on this system, and it does work. So if someone puts in a complaint, it comes to my email and I see it via text. Or if you did it in the real site as well, I would see it as well. Any questions about the form before I move?
I have one question.
Yes, Mia.
Will there be an opportunity, this is great, by the way. If I'm looking at it firsthand, this is a wonderful start. Will there be an opportunity at some point in a different iteration where an agency or division can get it pre-populated? Because I'm just concerned about data integrity in terms
Yes.
of name, using the correct legal name of an entity or anything like that.
I'd be happy to do that one-on-one, or if the commissioner feels so moved, I can do it. I can come to the enforcement meetings where the enforcement agent staff gets together, and I could show actual populated information.
It could be true.
Like I'm saying, I can do it I could do it in a more one-on-one setting, so I could do it with you just to show you, or I know that their enforcement staff meets informally to talk about ways to collaborate. I could do it there. That is not open to, that's not subject to the open.
I think the question was, is there, in a further iteration, will there be the opportunity that you type in the name and it'll draw right from SDAT, for example, and populate it?
Understood.
Yes.
Like auto.
Yes.
Integrity in terms of
I think that's a question for us all to consider. So that's why we wanted to show you the portal, because we didn't want to, updating this, which is a group effort in terms of thought and finances. So there has to be a group consideration as to what the form can do. Like when we sat down, when Traylene and myself sat down with the labor IT team, you know, kids in a candy store, they're willing to do whatever we want, but they want us to have a clear vision of what we want if we want to continue with this. So it can, yes, to answer your question now that I better understand your question, it can do that if you would like. Any other questions about the form?
I think that's a good point, is that you know, everyone has their own reporting structures internally. It's almost, you need that like Tinker Toy connector piece to do the auto-populate. And I will say my experience in the state thus far has been almost all those transitions are done manually because we can't easily figure out a way to, and it's possible, we did it from one of our core programs to like import stuff, export stuff from the AS400 to like send it over to the comptroller. Like it's doable, but it does take, it might take an individual solution for each agency.
And just, I'm gonna quickly go through some of these. Again, happy to do this one-on-one with individual agencies if you wanna see like how this actually works in real time with information loaded up. But just for the sake of right now, this is how you would view a complaint. So if we had submitted, you can view it by number, you can view it by company name, FEIN, excuse me, and then agencies. So these are the agencies that are currently in, that have access: comptroller, workers' comp, insurance, so MIA, labor and industry, unemployment. So I really think the only folks that would be missing currently are OMP and SSTAT. And then of course, staff that are staff members that are staff on the task force also have accounts that they can access. So if you decide that you want to, you would view a complaint, you would subject it, and if we go back to the form at that bottom line where it says, are you asking for a joint investigation? That's how you would be able to find joint investigations as well. So there's two sets of way of finding those things. And then if you want to create follow-up, go here. And then you can also view reports. So might have to go all the way back. So this is what a summary report would look like. So you would see fraudulent activity, all the various agencies that are members of the task force, and it just is a summary of, and these fields would be populated as we would be filling out and completing investigations. You would see a summary of those things, like penalties assessed, earn unpaid wages assessed, withholding taxes assessed. So as you give this portal, and one of our folks at Labor IT said this, the portal is as good as the information you give it. So if you give it a lot of information to work with, it will give you back a lot of information to work with. But if you don't give it anything, it's not going to give you anything. And that's kind of like, it doesn't auto-populate automatically. So that is where I think, the drop-off is I can only give you, baby, what you give me back. So that's the piece of the system. But the portal is quite sophisticated in what it can do and what it can report. And it's really safe in terms of being able to transfer data back and forth. Just like when you receive a complaint notice, it doesn't have the complaint up in your general email. You actually have to log in and look at the complaint. You only get a notice that there is a complaint in the system. Any questions? The last thing, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I know that you were discussing this, so I don't know if it's been nailed down yet. Do we know whether the portal as it's currently configured meets the confidentiality, privacy, et cetera, requirements that the comptroller would require and that UI would require, just possibly other agencies as well? Those are the two I know that have a lot of sensitive information. I guess that's a
I believe it does. So it only works on labor. So you literally can't, it only works on the internet. So it only really, I can't take this to Starbucks and open it. Like, it won't open. You can't do this on your own private laptop. It won't open. You have to be logged on to the network for it to open. I tried it yesterday just to make sure. And you can't open it unless you're logged on. And that's why we had to do a transition, because you have to be logged on Labor's network. Now, how that would work, or your official governmental Maryland network. So that's why certain folks need certain emails, because the system has to be able to recognize it, because if not, you're not going to be able to access it. So that's like the first line of defense, is you have to be logged on to a certain network. Certain people can only have access. And if you go to the last few pages of your user's guide, you see that there are specific assignments to the people who are actively able to log in. So there is an administrator and there's a staff person. So you can have administrator access, you can have joint enforcement committee access, and only administrators administrators get to see a certain level of information and staff members get to see a certain level of information. And then there also is a further difference between what information you can input at the administrator and staff level. So one of the things I will have to go back and do before I get the secretary to sign off is that we have to assign administrators and staff members to your agencies, because that will determine what they can see and what they can input into the system. And like I said, nobody is allowed on, no one is allowed to have a login unless it's signed off by the secretary. So like each time you want to add someone, we literally have to put it in a formal memo and have it signed off. So.
Picking up on the commissioner's point though, I know that we'll probably have to make arrangements to have our IT folks look at it, because there are requirements that we can and cannot, that really guide our activity in this area. So and it's really only one of our units, our criminal division, they're the most strict. So we just have to make sure that whatever investigations they're working on, that they're even allowed to put it into something else that's not theirs.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the case for
Yeah.
our offices, yeah.
This is one of the challenges, but if,
Yes.
at least if people know sort of what it looks like, it's,
Right.
it gives you something more concrete to have the conversation with.
Yes.
So if you have, I guess, further questions, just feel free to, as you look and work through the user's guide, if you want a real-time information to see how the information works, what it does as it populates, I'm happy to do that one-on-one, or again, I can meet with a group, however you would like. And with more advanced notice, we would be able to get our IT folks on so they can explain more of the technical privacy pieces for you as well.
When you say your IT folks, was labor part of enterprising, or took your staff, or do you guys have your own IT people? Because that's, I don't know about other agencies, that's part of our issue, is all of our IT staff, the prior administration took them all, gave them to do it, and then do it doesn't support us, we don't have an MOU with them. So.
Oh, no. That's not good.
We do have some staff, it's not what it was.
Okay,
But this is a labor tool, like this was birthed out of labor.
got it, okay.
And what's your timeline for getting back the and what kind of timeline are we talking about?
This will move as fast as you all want to move it. I think now, I do believe there is a stopgap, as I understand it, for the agencies to communicate right now. But I think the goal of this task force, at least this iteration, is to make systems more permanent. So when we're all either retired, I have a long ways away from retirement, but when the next folks come in, there is a permanent system in place that they can use these tools. So that could be the next staff meeting or the next JTF official meeting. But I'm happy to start fielding that. But I really kind of want to have all the information and all the wants first, because once you ask our IT folks to work on it, they kind of like to do it in a more systematic process. So we can have those conversations offline.
Well, and I think it's perfect that, so the enforcement experts are meeting and discussing regularly what's needed, right? Like, because we don't want a portal just for like a portal's sake. So what is useful to you? I think it very much gets at what can a portal accomplish that, regular information sharing can't, what is it really trying to get at? And so I guess, an ask to all the agencies is to really go back, take a close look at this, go back and try to figure out what would we think is most helpful out of this? Deputy, you look like you're.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just nodding because in our last enforcement group meeting, the comptroller's team came up with at least potentially a conditional, maybe more than a conditional way to share information that meets the data security needs on the comptroller side, as well as, the ability to share that data, again, assuming a data sharing agreement is in place, but the methodology is like essentially a secure FTP, right? So there's some simplicity. And Matt just very kindly sent out a link to the folks on the enforcement group. So I think we can play with those things in parallel and see what works there that either could be imported here, or whether that is in itself a self-contained system that might work and be, have a little more flexibility. So I think this will be an ongoing part of the discussion among the enforcement group, especially as we start to think about and work on cases together. What sort of information might we want to put in here? What sort of information is useful to share, right? Everything you said.
Well, and for internal, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, my apologies. We set up, at the comptroller's office, we have a secure file sharing system that we already use that meets our standards. I think our standards are probably the strictest here. So in an effort to try to, start sharing what information we can share now at this point in time and get the ball rolling and do what each agency can do independently, until we can work more together to start taking more actions. We set that up as a temporary means to be able to exchange what we can exchange now in a secure way that meets our requirements, whether that's a long-term fix or not, like Deb Key said, is, but yes.
Terrific. So I think, any other comments or questions in this vein? We are getting close to wrapping up, but I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. Obviously, if there are items people would like to include on the next agenda, please reach out to Deja Desiree. I want to thank the folks here today and all the staff who have been, working to continue to advance this conversation in between. I particularly want to thank Deja Desiree for working with our IT team to get this presentation together. So thank you for that.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Good job. Are there any other announcements that any of the agencies want to flag? I have a few around sort of our next steps, next meeting. So as was mentioned, the plan is to have the next meeting on the 20th of June. I see that as an evening
Yes.
potentially?
Yes, ma'am. So this is the stakeholder meeting. So we support businesses and working people, and businesses usually close after hours. So it will be at 6.
Okay.
It'll be completely virtual. We are finalizing just the run of show. It'll be via Zoom. We will reach out to you in a more succinct fashion with a treatise of just your role, information we may need. We're gonna probably have a similar slideshow, information we'll need to put that together. It'll be for all industries, so we're gonna have breakout rooms and moderators. So we wanna make sure that those pieces are succinct before we reach out. But please, yes, we would like all task force members and or designees. If you have issues, if you or your designee, or if neither one of you are available, an appointed person would be super helpful. Is you'll probably be broken up based on industry. So we know that MIA and workers' comp can hit certain industries that maybe we can't over at the Department of Labor, and O&P can hit certain industries that we can't, that workers' comp and MIA can't. So I'll probably be reaching out to you specifically. So as I think about industry assignments, who's most appropriate, because we're doing healthcare, and I think that would be really good for O&P. But maybe not the most appropriate place for another. So I'm trying to figure out which industry you all are most appropriate to work with. So it's a substantive conversation, and hearing conversation from you. This is really, we want to understand what businesses are having issues with, because they say that there are issues there are barriers to entry for them with understanding compliance around misclassification and workplace fraud, and the workers have their issues about when they interact with us, when they want to file a complaint, issues they have. So we want to make sure that's a balanced and nuanced conversation. So we want to make sure the appropriate people are in the right places.
And you indicated that the June 20th is an evening meeting. Do you have a particular time and place? I'm just trying to figure out who.
It'll be 6 p.m., it'll be 6 to 8 p.m. It'll be completely virtual. We'll make sure that you have a link, and everything that you need will be provided from the Joint Enforcement Task Force team. So we'll make sure that you have all the information we need from you and anything that you may need for that evening to help facilitate conversations. We will ensure that you have that information as well.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think that concludes our business for this meeting. Unless there are any final flags. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, any discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Okay, Joint Employment Task Force is Enforcement Task Force. Thank you so much.
Hope the binder stays.
They stay here.
They stay here.
Okay.
Please.